Hello everyone, Mrs. Fondre here. Today we're going to be talking and learning all about Vincent Van Gogh. Now maybe you've heard that name before because he's probably one of the most famous artists ever to have lived. So it's about time we talk about him in art class, all right? We're going to learn a little bit about his life. We're going to look at some of his work and make a project based on some of his art, okay? So let me share my screen so we can get started. It's kind of fun because I have two computers going right now. All right, so Vincent Van Gogh, click to my first slide. This is a self-portrait, so he painted himself, and he's really famous for those swirly, whirly kind of lines. So maybe you recognize some of his stuff when we see it. So a little bit about Vincent Van Gogh. He was born in 1853, and he lived until 1890, so he was only 37 years old when he passed away. He's from the Netherlands, which is an area in Europe across the ocean from us, and in less than 10 years, he painted almost 900 paintings. That's a lot of paintings for a decade, so he went pretty fast while he was working. I think something even more interesting than all those paintings is that he also wrote almost 800 letters. I know nowadays people can just call each other or they could send a text message or an email, but back in the 1800s, you had to write letters. And he wrote letters all the time to his brother and his best friend, potentially his only friend, Theo, his brother Theo. The sad part about his life is that he only sold one painting in his entire life, and nowadays people love his work. One of the reasons why he only sold one painting is that he didn't really have a good time getting along with other people. He's known for not having many friends, and he usually kind of lived and stayed on his own. And one of the most famous things he's actually well known for is that he cut off part of or his entire ear. We'll talk about that in just a little bit because I know everyone always has questions about that. But a lot of his most famous work that he did was while he was in an asylum to help hopefully get him mentally a little healthier. So he checked himself into an asylum and he did lots of paintings. And some of his most famous paintings in the world were created while he was trying to help himself. All right. And he's known as a post-impressionist artist. So what's post-impressionism? Great question. Glad you asked. If you remember last year, we talked about an artist named Claude Monet. He was really famous for painting haystacks and lily pads and had really, really fast paintings as well. So you can see I have two images here. I have Claude Monet's Impression Sunrise, which we looked at last year. And then I have a painting by Vincent Van Gogh of similar things. They're scenes above water, okay? And you can see that they're similar because they use really kind of brighter colors. You can see that pop of orange in the sun for Claude Monet, and you can see those bright stars in Vincent Van Gogh's. And they really slapped the paint on. They used really thick paint when they went. They didn't care if it was really delicate or easy. They just put it on the canvas. They were painting like crazy people, which is really cool to see. And they usually painted really realistic things, like they would paint landscapes, like both of these paintings are, or they would paint a vase full of flowers, or they would paint a building, so realistic things. So that's how these two styles are similar. But post-impressionism, which is what Vincent Van Gogh did, post-impressionism, they're more about making things look more geometric. So that would be using straighter lines or doing really curvy things, all right, versus more realistic proportions. Like instead of having a head shape, it might be more stretched out head shape or full pulled apart face. And they did this kind of stretching and pulling of these objects to kind of make it look a little bit more expressive. So it looks a little bit more interesting and it's able to show off how it's feeling a little bit more. It's kind of when you're expressing your feelings, the whole post-impressionism was starting to express themselves more. And there's actually a style of art that we're going to hopefully talk about later in the year called Expressionism, which follows this one. So paintings get even more stretched out and emotional after a while, all right? And another thing that's a little different from post-impressionism is the fact that they used unnatural or arbitrary colors, so not realistic necessarily, all right? We know that the stars in the sky are little tiny blips of white, but you can even see in Van Gogh's painting right here that they look like they're glowing and they're big and they're yellow, so they made them a little bit more not realistic, all right? Because Impressionism was all about getting a natural lighting as it was in the day, but then post-impressionism was like, nah, let's not do it as realistic. All right, so it gets a little more creative here. All right, so let's get into Van Gogh's little mental health for you today. Okay, so back in December 23rd of 1888, that was the day that Van Gogh cut off part of his ear. We don't know for sure if it was his entire ear or part of an ear. The records kind of are conflicting on that. But during that moment, he was having a really heated argument with another artist named Paul Gauguin, which is actually another artist we talked about last year as well. So he was having a really, really rough time, really big argument. And he was actually having kind of a mental breakdown where he was not healthy in his mind. So he later, like I said, checked himself into an asylum to help hopefully get him in the right track to feeling a little healthier in the mind, thinking more positively, being better to himself, right? And he even said on the record that he didn't remember doing it. He was in such a emotional state, he didn't remember cutting part of his ear or his ear off. So he didn't even remember that. And a reason why they think Van Gogh might have done that is because he actually had a problem with his brain. They kind of did some research on all of his symptoms and things he talked about, and the doctors today think he would have been diagnosed with a temporal lobe epilepsy, which is essentially meaning in his brain he was born with a clump that was not quite right, and it affected the way he thought and the way he saw and the way he interacted with people. So he was not born with a healthy, normal functioning brain. And that's why he had a hard time making friends. And he didn't really have anyone to emotionally support him in his life. He had his best friend, his brother Theo, that would help him out a lot. But Theo lived far away and he didn't have people close by that could care about him. So I just want to take a little quick time out to say, if you ever feel like you need a team or a support person to be there for you, always know that Mrs. Fondre is there for you, because I care about you and I want you to be the best, healthiest young person you can be. All right. So if you ever need someone, I'm totally there for you. I'm sure a lot of your family is there, your friends, your teachers. You got a team. You got someone you can count on. Okay. So like I said, Van Gogh didn't really have that. And actually a few years after this ear incident, he was shot and he died of an infection. And some people think he shot himself, and some people thought he was accidentally shot while he was out painting. They never found a weapon, so we really can't confirm or deny how or what happened, but he passed away from a gunshot wound, which is kind of sad. So he lived kind of a sad life. He just wanted to paint these beautiful, colorful things in this kind of dark mind that he had. He was troubled, and he wanted to make it better through his paintings, but wasn't really appreciated during his time. And now we look back and think, wow, he made some amazing things. And here are just a few of his beautiful, beautiful paintings that he made. And a lot of these were actually made while he was in his asylum trying to work on his mental health. So you can see all of them have a lot of things in common with the short little brush strokes and the swirls, and they just are bright colors. So for someone that was pretty sad and kind of on his own all the time, he tried to capture some joy and some light in his work, which is, I think, probably was good for him to do. All right. So the one painting that I know you probably recognize, one of the world famous paintings from Van Gogh, is this beautiful one, and it's called A Starry Night. All right. It's kind of interesting that this painting is only 2 by 3 feet big, so it's maybe about this big, not super ginormous, okay? But it was actually donated to the New York Museum, so you can go see it if you go to New York. And a lot of people think that this is his most expensive painting that ever was created, that someone bought later after he passed away, but that is not actually true. I want to show you the painting that was the most expensive that was sold from Vincent Van Gogh. And it is a portrait of his doctor, portrait of Dr. Gachet from 1890. And it sold in 1990 for $82.5 million. And if you do the math with how much the dollar is worth today, that's closer to $161 million and 400,000. I said that in the wrong order, but it's worth almost double that amount today, which is pretty crazy. All right. So with that being said, that's a little bit about Van Gogh and kind of his story. And hopefully we can learn a little bit about it with appreciating the things around you and finding those people in your life to be your support team. All right. And maybe the fact that making art is a good way to express yourself and to keep yourself healthy mentally too. All right. So if you have questions, comments, you want to talk more about Van Gogh, please feel free to comment below or to send me an email. I'd love to chat more with you about Van Gogh. But as for now, I'm going to stop the video here and I'm going to actually talk to you about what your project is going to be. I'm back, first grade, and I'm here to talk to you about your project. Now, in case you don't remember from the presentation, we're going to be doing one of Van Gogh's Cypress trees. That's a fancy name for a tree. So let me share my screen with you so you know what I'm talking about in case you can't quite remember what it looks like. All right. So here's one of many, many, many cypress trees that Vincent Van Gogh painted. He's done a lot of these in his paintings. And if you actually think about Starry Night and that big, mysterious, black, swirly blob, it's actually a cypress tree at nighttime. So let's get started on how to make one of these for you at home. All right. If you have paint, this is going to be a project you're going to need it. If you don't remember seeing the paint video I posted last week for our line project, there's a video there, but I'll probably send you a link again if you want to make your own paint at home. Otherwise, you can make do this week with crayons, color pencils, probably not markers because they get a little sticky and heavy and you can't mix those as well together. All right. So let me talk you through drawing one of these cypress trees. It's kind of a fun word, cypress trees. All right. So you're going to want a piece of paper today because a cypress tree is really tall and really skinny. You're going to want a really tall and a really skinny piece of paper. All right. So from here, you're going to need a pencil to just draw where we're going to put our cypress tree. All right. So I'm going to start. It's funny because I'm drawing this upside down because my camera's upside down. So I'm going to start from the top and doing kind of a squiggly wiggly line that kind of goes out here and back in. I'm going to start at the top again and I'm going to go from that point and kind of get bigger and bigger and bigger. It's kind of like a wiggly teardrop kind of shape, which is kind of the fun part about this. Right now, it's not a tree, so let's give it a little tree stump. Whoop, whoop. Okay, remember it's a little bit bigger when we go to the bottom if you're really thinking about it. And we're going to actually draw a line behind our tree. All right, so that's so our tree's on the ground, right? We don't want it flying off into the air. All right, from here, we're going to get painting. All right, it's going to be kind of fun. The colors you're going to need are white, blue, green, and yellow. All right, so we're actually going to start this painting off a little differently. We're going to get the biggest brush you have, or you could even almost use a finger if you needed it. And we're going to paint over everything with white. And the reason we're doing that is we're going to want a lot of the lighter colors. So why not start off with a lighter paint on the bottom? This is actually called an underpainting. It's kind of a fun thing to think about. We painted under our painting. And because we did it with pencil, you should be able to see the pencil underneath. If you can't, spread that paint out thinner. All right. And you can kind of see where you're painting based on how shiny your paper is. All right. If you don't have paint, you can just start coloring this in with marker. So have fun with the marker life. But for my mixers of paint today, let me show you how we're going to start this. Don't forget the middle of your tree. All right. You can see my paintbrush got a little dirty there, but we'll paint over it. It's all good. All right. So now that we've got our underpainting done, our next step is going to be the ground, because the ground is kind of this yellowish greenish color. So I'm going to dip a little bit into the yellow, and I'm going to do some little bit of tapping everywhere. You might get your fingers dirty here because your paper might bend. I'm going to tap all over here, and it kind of makes it look a little fuzzier. Okay, you get into your tree a little bit. It's okay, just paint over it. Okay, a little bit of yellow, and you can see it's mixing in with the white a little bit, so that's really, really fun. Right? And then because the grass is not always solid yellow, we're going to get a tiny bit of green, like a little itty bitty. I hardly have any on here. And I'm going to tap around in a circle and mix it in. So we make this really beautiful, get a little more paint, itty bitty, not a lot. This really beautiful light green grass, all right? Because it's mixing into yellow, making kind of a yellow green. And it's also mixing into that white we first painted down. So it's got this beautiful kind of color going on, and it looks fluffy and fuzzy, just like Van Gogh would have liked. All right. From here, your fingers might get stuck. That's okay. From here, we're going to do our tree, which is more of a darker green, and we're going to actually mix in some blue too. So our tree is going to be where we get these wigglies going on. We're going to go wiggle, wiggle, wiggle all the way up with this. And it's okay to see your brush stroking there because it adds some of that swirly whirly stuff going on here. All right. And I'm going to go up and down and up and down. Get those swirlies going on here. And to help see those swirly whirlies a little bit better, okay, I'm going to actually get a smidge, itty bitty, not a whole lot, itty bitty bits of blue. I'm going to do some wiggles in here too. Okay. It makes the tree a little bit darker. Green, which is sweet. And don't be like you can't be afraid to mix, friends. We're mixing and it's gonna be fun. All right, if this brush you're like, ooh, my paintbrush is too big, what you can do, switch and grab a slightly smaller one, and maybe you want to add some more green back in because you're like, oh, I got too blue. That's fine. Mix some wiggly smaller green in there all the way up to the top. All right, so I still have a tree stump. I don't have brown paint, but I probably will get some. So if you want to go back later and get some brown for your stump, that's great. All right, so we got this swirly whirly looking thing. Let me see if this light helps you see a little bit better. A little bit. Got this swirly whirly beautiful cypress tree. Okay, from here we have two very dirty paintbrushes. This one has a little bit of blue and green and yellow, and this one got a little green. It's got a lot going on. So what we're going to do, it's okay if you have a dirty paintbrush, but what I want you to do, under your painting, you should hopefully have newspaper. I should have mentioned it at the beginning, but if you don't, it cleans up pretty easy. Wipe some of that extra paint off, because you don't need all of that. Okay? And then we're going to just go straight to blue. And we're going to do some swirlies all over the place. I'm going to do some wiggly lines. Okay? Wiggly lines. And it's okay if you get over your tree a little bit, because we can always go back and crisp that up a little bit. Crispin. It's not even a word. All right. And already my white paint that I started with dried a little bit. So what I'm going to be doing once I get all my bluish greenish sky going on here, okay, I'm going to actually go back in with some of that white. Okay. And we're going to make some more swirly whirly good things happening with your white. Now, also don't forget the edges of your paper, right? I'm going to get all those swirly whirlies in there. All right, I'm going to switch over to a smaller brush, and I'm going to wipe this off too. Well, I can't have people calling me in the middle of that. Whoa, I can't do that. Sorry about that interruption. And from there, I'm going to get some white. I'm going to do some. She doesn't get that I can't take calls right now. Can't do it. All right. So I'm going to think of spirals when I'm doing this. All right. And I'm going to go all over the place and have some of these fun, spinny, wavy lines. And since these are so swirly, the word to kind of talk about these is organic, right? Because it's free flowing. It can go wherever it wants. Okay. And all good. Right? Geometric lines, on the other hand, would be a little bit more straight and stiff like a box or a square. So we definitely want one of the swirly organic colors going. Okay, so mixing in with that white to make those swirly whirlies. There you go. Good. I'm digging it. All right. So, like I said, we're gonna get a little brown to finish that stump off, and maybe we can go back at some green and make that cypress tree look a little more crisp here. All right. So it's a lot of painting today. It's a lot of tap, tap, tapping. It's a lot of painting fast. And I know we're not used to painting fast, and mixing colors is kind of a fun thing to do too, because we don't always mix colors. But today you get to play with mixing colors and messing around a little bit with how colors work. All right. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, please feel free to write a comment to me or send me an email so I can help you out the best I can. And I'd love to see these projects. So if you could please submit them into the Seesaw classroom so I can see all these beautiful trees, I would love it. All right. So hopefully see these soon and stay creative.